Just want to start off by saying that in this sermon, I'm not going to really touch on this past year of being Jewish, even though this year has been a topsy-turvy and difficult one for many of us. I know many of you have experienced or struggled either at work or with friends. Many of us have felt alienated. We've had to unfriend or unfollow people on social media. We felt the anguish of knowing that our friends and family in Israel are suffering. You might know people who've been drafted into reserve duty, as I have, or found yourselves advocating and reminding the world that innocent people are still being held hostage after almost a year. I'm going to be speaking more directly about that tomorrow morning during the Rosh Hashanah service, so I'll invite you to come to that. And tonight, I was thinking I would take everyone here on a journey to 8th grade, and particularly 8th grade Sunday school at Temple Emanu-El. So some of you probably were in 8th grade, whether it was here at Temple Emanu-El or some other synagogue or Hebrew, or even if you didn't go to Hebrew school, y'all were in 8th grade at some point. If you're anything like me, 8th grade was probably a tough year for you socially. And if no one else? Come on, that was like the worst. And if you're anything like me, you also maybe didn't pay a lick of attention in Hebrew school when you were in 8th grade. Yeah, a little bit, right? I was there to see my friends, right? That's what I was there for. But as adults, I know a lot of us would love to go back to go to 8th grade. So tonight, we're going to go to 8th grade. I get to teach our 8th grade Judaica class here on Sunday mornings alongside Tyler. Tyler, raise your hand. And Stephanie, who's not here tonight. Raise your hand if you teach at YLNE also. I know we have a number of teachers in the house here. Thank you all for teaching. If you ever want to teach, let us know. Subbing is fine. That's good. And our 8th grade class this year is all about storytelling and the Torah. It gives kids who just finished their bar and bat mitzvahs the chance to do a deep dive into more than just their own Torah portion. And this year, Tyler, is Megan here? Megan, are you here? No. Okay. This year, Tyler and Stephanie, with some help from Megan Sims, we decided to help the kids understand the beauty of a good story by analyzing some of their favorite songs. So on the very first day, we asked them, what are some of your favorite songs? Number one answer was Taylor Swift, right? Then a shocking number of them were like, no, they're already past it. Like, Taylor Swift's already too cool. Like, you're already past it with Taylor Swift now. I hate to break it to you. But one kid put Billy Joel. And it turns out the youngest Gen Zers actually still love Billy Joel, even though his last album came out when I was 3 years old. So a few weeks ago, we played Piano Man for them. And to our great pleasure, not only did most of the kids know the song, many of them even knew the words. And then we dove into the song that was written before many of their parents were born. We were trying to figure out what makes this song so great. What about this song is so good that nearly every single American knows it? It turns out it's not just because it's catchy. Piano Man is a great story. And what's so good about the story is that it starts out completely normal. 9 o'clock on a Saturday, regular crowd shuffles in. There's an old guy who's drinking but can't remember the song that he wants to think of, but he requests it anyway, just like an old guy does, right? The bartender even gets the piano man, who we soon find out is the narrator, and his name is Billy, a drink, and he's up for a good conversation. Most of us would look at this and say, that sounds like a pretty typical Saturday night at a bar. And then, shazam! A bunch of unexpected things start happening. Turns out the bartender's a bit depressed because he actually wants to be an actor. We meet some successful people, a real estate novelist, which I'm still trying to figure out what that is. We meet Davy and the Navy, and they remind us that money and success, they can't buy us happiness. We meet a go-getter Politico who is actually just a waitress, and it's a real knock on waitresses, in my opinion, because waiting tables is the toughest job I've ever had in my entire life. And we get a businessman who's just stressed out and wants a joint at the end of a long day. After all of that, after all of those unexpected things, Billy Joel tells us what the story is really about. They're sharing a drink they call loneliness, but it's better than drinking alone. Now, 8th graders, some of them get loneliness, and others, they're not there yet. But y'all have had some life experience. You know that being lonely is part of life. Even if you're in the world's happiest marriage, even if you've got the world's best friends group, even if you have the most amazing dog or the cutest cat or an incredible job, we all know that a fundamental part of the human experience is being lonely. It's something we all understand. And despite the unexpectedness of each story within the bigger story, Billy Joel's song paints a picture that's very familiar for each of us. And when it's done best, it teaches us a little bit of something about ourselves. It teaches us that sometimes when you're lonely, it's good to remember probably everyone else is too. So next time, share it with somebody, because chances are they'll say the same thing, and you'll say cheers. Piano Man is art. Billy Joel is a storyteller par excellence. And as a result, he's one of those artists that has the capacity to transcend generations. He's even made it to Gen Z. Now, some of y'all are Gen Z, I know. I'm sorry for those who are over. Now, I'm not much of an artist, but I'm going to take a stab here at a definition of art. So whether it's painting, or a photograph, or a song, or a movie, or a book, what makes art art is that it tells a story that is both unexpected, but also realistic. And through that unexpected but realistic moment, the reader or listener or viewer, the person who's consuming the art, can deepen their own understanding of the human experience. Or, as George Saunders puts it in this incredible book, A Swim in the Pond in the Rain, he says, "Fiction is not decorative, but a vital moral ethical tool. It changes you when you read it. It makes the world seem to be telling a different, more interesting story, a story in which you might play a meaningful part and in which you might have responsibility." He continues, "The aim of art, namely, is to ask big questions. How are we supposed to be living down here? What were we put here to accomplish? What should we value? What is truth anyway, and how might we recognize it? How can we feel peace when some people have everything and others have nothing? How are we supposed to live with joy in a world that seems to want us to love other people, but then roughly separates us from them in the end, no matter what?" These are some pretty existential questions. But unless you are living under a rock or have completely numbed yourself to the human experience, these questions come up in life. If people try to define Judaism or the Jewish people, the first thing they often say is religion. And religion is a lovely answer that is partially true. But in our English-speaking American context, religion often means a group of people that believe the same certain things, particularly about God or the divine or something supernatural or miracles. And immediately as Jews, we run into a problem with that definition because I can't compel any of you to think in a certain way, and I don't want to. And more importantly, there's no way that anyone in this room completely agrees about any of those things. So rather, I'd say that Judaism and the Jewish people should be defined as a story. Or even more dramatically, I would say that Judaism is an artistic expression. It's a moral and ethical tool that we can use to change ourselves, and it can help us ask some of the most essential questions about what it means to be a human being, and maybe even start answering some of them. And the good news is that each and every one of you is a part of the story. If Judaism is a piano bar, we are all sitting down and having a drink. And we're not just sitting down with each other. We get to be in a room with people who are no longer alive, people who speak a different language than we do, people who lived in a completely different cultural context than we do. We get to sit down with a doctor who lived in Egypt 1,000 years ago, and some dude who knew what it was like to have the Romans live, and someone who lived in ancient Canaan and saw their neighbors sacrifice children because they thought that that would bring about more fertility. And the Torah is the music that's playing at the piano bar. The Torah is, in many ways, the original great story. And it's the story that has allowed us, the Jewish people, to become a great story ourselves. Before the Torah was first put down in writing, the ancient world was full of poetry. The Torah was the first time that people decided to write down narratives instead of poetry. One of the foremost scholars on the Torah, Robert Alter, describes it like this. He says, if you were to watch 12 Western movies, you would notice some expected themes from all Western movies. Maybe in 11 of the 12 stories, the sheriff is known for a quick draw. But if in the 12th story, the sheriff has a weak arm and carries a rifle instead, we know something new about that sheriff, and we know something new about that story, and we actually learn something new about the entire genre, and it might teach us a lesson or two about being human as well. The Torah is full of similar stories like this. He calls them type scenes, which is a kind of fancy way to say it, that are repeated throughout the entire thing. So some of the stories that have the same theme or fit in the same genre category, for example, main character has a divine encounter, a dramatic scene about infertility and then someone getting pregnant. A hero has a moment of trepidation about taking on leadership role. These are all stories that are repeated over and over and over again in the Torah. Each of the individual stories can teach us something about the person involved. And at its best, the arc of the stories can teach us too. I'm going to give you an example. The 6 stories of sibling rivalry that happen in the book of Genesis. Any of you have siblings? Any of you have fights with your siblings? All right, there we go, right? Genesis starts out with about the worst possible sibling relationship. Cain doesn't talk to his brother Abel, and then he kills him because he got jealous. We learn here that Cain is a spiritually weak man, and maybe that human beings can be spiritually weak creatures. That in some of us, a little jealousy can spark great rage. Then we get Abraham and Lot, their cousins who go their separate ways. Then Isaac and Ishmael, who make fun of each other and each other's mothers. One gets kicked out of the house. The other gets nearly sacrificed and never speaks to his family again. Jacob engages in trickery with his brother Esau and tries to kill him. But in this iteration of the story, we have our first reconciliation. The first time that 2 brothers who hated one another and then after many years apart decided it was more important to give each other a hug. Now, that didn't come easily. Jacob wrestled with some strange being. Maybe it was God. Maybe it was his brother. Maybe it was an angel. Maybe it was himself. And he came out of it with a new name, Israel, one who wrestles with divine beings. Before meeting his brother again, something that tells you that sometimes you need to wrestle with yourself. You need to do the work in order to navigate those tough relationships. Number 5 is the Joseph novella. It's an epic tale of sibling rivalry that ends with the ultimate reconciliation, with tshuva. Joseph tests his brothers. He gives them an opportunity to treat their brother Benjamin the same way that they treated him. But the brothers clearly learn their lesson. They engage in tshuva, so Joseph forgives them. There are some who call this the first recorded instance of forgiveness in human history. And finally, we meet Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and it seems they're once again going to be set up for sibling rivalry, and we learn that they just get past it. They think of each other as brothers, even though their parents accidentally facilitated a little bit of rivalry in them, as parents might accidentally do. The arc of these stories, these 6 stories, is extraordinary. Each of them has the same type scene. Each of them is the same genre of art. And yet the slight differences between them and the changes that are made when you put them all together, that allows us to see something new about what it means to be a person, about what it means to fight with the people that you're closest to, and what we can do in order to put aside our tendencies for jealousy and learn how to forgive those that are closest to us. And thus is born the high holidays. These next 10 days are designed to be the 10 most serious days on the Jewish calendar. It's a time for us to engage in deep introspection, to consider our relationship with ourselves and our loved ones and our people and its story, to think about how we show up at the piano bar that we call Judaism. May this new year be a year in which each and every one of you can lean in, can celebrate being a part of the story of our people, adding what you can add to your place in the story, being a part of the conversation, contributing to the tapestry of the Jewish people. And with that confidence, may you go into the world reminding others the beauty of our people and our story and its art. Shana Tova.